Hi, and welcome to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast presented by Wolf Precision Incorporated, where we learn about and share long range shooting and custom rifle building. I am your host, Jamie Dodson, and welcome to the show. Hi, and welcome to episode 221 of Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Dodson, and welcome back to the show. In this episode, we are going to get into our three-part series on the three types of reloaders. So when we got into our last podcast, we really started talking about reloading and some of the safety aspects of it and some of the things that we've talked about in the past when it comes to reloading. But that said, it opened the door up for some conversations when we had talked about the three personalities or the three types of reloaders that you get into when you start talking about reloading itself. And you really do have three different personalities a lot of times, and sometimes a combination of one or two of them that get into reloading. You know, you've got the saver, you've got the artist, and you've got the competitor. All three of these can fall into different pitfalls or traps or can get themselves into different situations where you're either doing unsafe practices or you're making some unsafe ammo or you're taking a risk, and then sometimes just unbeknownst to yourself. So we're going to make this a three-part series, and we're going to talk about each of the personalities as you get into reloading, depending on which one you are, right? And we're going to poke some fun because we have all done this and we've all been there and we've all gone through all of these personalities, especially as you keep learning and growing as a shooter. And so some of the things that we're going to talk about, I have personal experience with. And so it's not really meant to point out faults or flaws. It's just meant to point out some of the things that you might get into or some of the decisions that you make, and some of the ones that we've made here as well over the course of reloading for nearly, 40 years. So lots of good information we're going to pass out here. Ought to be a great podcast. Without further ado, here we go. All right, before we get started, I want to say a really big thank you to MDT. MDT is the maker of fine rifle chassis. They make everything from the Oryx, the unsung hero, straight up to all of the competition chassis, including the new J. Allen that just got released again. There's so many good chassis that they're working on. They really are taking the industry by storm and really leading in the marketplace. So they offer a wide variety of chassis for both competition and for hunting, and a wide variety of price points, which I still say that the Oryx is the best chassis for under $1,000 you can buy on the market. There's just a lot of stuff I like about it. So if you want to upgrade your rifle and you would like to do it with a chassis that fits you well, or if you're going to shoot really long range stuff, fits you perfectly, you can stop over and look at all the fine selection today at mdttac.com. That's mdttac.com. We would also say a big thank you to Krieger Barrels. Krieger is the maker of fine cut rifle barrels. They are a family owned and operated business in the great state of Wisconsin. I say this all the time. I've known these guys forever. They have a massive lead time, which is one of the downfalls to Krieger. When we order their barrels, we sometimes order them a year out. And so it's hard to keep inventory. However, though, they opened up a new window to customers. It's called Krieger Direct, where they try to consistently put stuff up for sale that customers can buy and have in as little as 2 to 3 business days, and they would like to see customers buying it, and so they don't offer any incentives for dealers or manufacturers to purchase off of there. So it's a great porthole for you to sort of jump ahead of the line of all of us that order some quantity of barrels and get one quickly, and just keep an eye out for what's in stock. So you log on every day, try to keep an update on it if you're looking for a barrel, and as soon as you see it, grab it. So it's called Krieger Direct. You can learn more by stopping over to kriegerbarrels.com. That's kriegerbarrels.com today. So reloading and the saver. Almost everyone that I know that got into the reloading aspect of wanting to make ammunition usually fell into it for this reason, and it includes myself. So I started into reloading. Part of it was the art of it. I certainly get hooked into things that attract my attention. My wife says I'm really bad at this. If something gets my attention, I just want to learn all the time. So I'm always learning and studying and picking up new things, and my brain is just wired that way. And if I get down a rabbit hole, it sort of can be dangerous too. At least that's what she would say. But when you get into reloading, most of us got into it because they're either trying to save money on ammunition, or in my case, I was trying to be able to shoot more on a budget. Reloading allows you the opportunity in long term to actually get the dollar to stretch more so you can get more bang for your buck, no pun intended. You can go out and spend more range time. You can go to more matches. I think you get a little bit better control over the ammunition as well. But being the new reloader, there's some things I want to talk about here that hopefully will save you some heartache, potentially keep you out of getting yourself into a potential dangerous situation, and then also save you money. It's really amazing, the stuff that's out there. And so I'm going to break this down into several different sections here on the podcast because this is where most of us start. Now, we are going to dive in to the artist. That'll be next week's podcast. And then the last one is going to be the competitor. So we're going to dive into all three personalities and talk about the different things that you should keep an eye on or just give you some warnings, right? So you got into long range shooting, you got into handgun shooting, all of this stuff, and you're really enjoying it. And unfortunately, ever since the late 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21, ammunition has gone through the roof. It is so expensive to buy factory ammunition. Now, it seems to be coming back around again, but it's always a pendulum. Like, once you've been in the market for so long, you realize that it swings in both directions to the extreme sometimes. I mean, there was times when powder was on sale that, you could just trip over the stuff at every store. And shame on me, I should have been buying it and putting it in inventory. And now I have it in inventory, just for the record. But there were many times I could have bought it for half of what I currently pay for it, if not less than that. And when you get into reloading and you're thinking about, okay, I love to shoot, right? And you get that guilt trip when you go to the range and you spent $50 for 20 rounds. Well, it's sort of like having a speedboat or something that just consumes a massive amount of money the more you enjoy it, right? You take a twin-engine powerboat, like a Fountain or something like that. Now, don't get me wrong. If you can afford the boat, I'm sure gas isn't quite an issue. But regardless, you're talking about gallons per mile. You're not taking a 300-mile road trip in that boat. It's just the guilt alone off the cost of that would just talk you right out of it. Common sense is common sense, right? So when you're at the range and you love to shoot, and of course you can go out and buy 3, 4, 5 boxes of ammo. It's not going to kill you. And most people, it doesn't destroy the budget. It hurts a little bit. But that guilt part of it that, hey, I just spent $250 at the range in like an hour of shooting. And then, like all of us, especially us guys, we do the math. We're like, well, let's see, if I do 3 range trips a month, oh my God, that's almost $1,000, $750, And if I go shoot a match, which is 200 more rounds or 10 more boxes at, $50 a box, well, now I'm spending $1,200 and $1,500. I'm not doing that. I'm not spending $20,000 a year on ammunition. So even though that's not really what's going to happen, and you might not shoot all of that, right? That part of our brains are wired that we do the math, right? We're like, yeah, this is going to get really expensive. And then if you're married and you've got children and you got a spouse and you go out and shoot a box of ammo, well, that's a nice dinner for you and your spouse, or a couple boxes for the whole family. And so I think part of it is because it's a pleasure sport, right? This is something that's voluntary. It's something that we love to do and something that we want to do. But it's also something that we can feel a little guilty about when we're going out and just dropping massive amounts of money on ammunition. So most people, myself included, got into reloading to try to get the budget to stretch further. So if I can spend $300 a month on ammunition, well, rather than going out back in the day and spending $20 a box, I could actually make 3 times that. I think reloading after you recycle your brass can be had as little as, $3 to $5 a box. So when you do the math that way, you're like, wow, I can get 4 times the amount or 5 times the amount of enjoyment out of that dollar rather than just buying the factory ammunition. So down this road you go. One of the things that you're going to have to take into consideration as a new reloader, right? You're trying to save money, is right out of the gate, buying the right equipment the first time, but also being really weary of, I am just shell-shocked at the cost of some of the quote-unquote premium presses and quote-unquote premium this and quote-unquote premium that. And for new shooters especially, they look to reloading as a way to save some money and get their budget to stretch further, especially their shooting budget, and not feel guilty about all the shooting they're going to do. And the first thing they do is they go online and they look at a press that cost over $1,300. And then they look at dies that cost $200, $300. And then they look at a powder thrower that cost $1,800. And then they look at an annealer that cost $1,800. And they start doing the math and they're like, I'm going to spend 10 grand just to start making ammunition. So the first thing I want to warn you about is being careful on that side of it. Now, if you have the money to spend and you don't mind spending it, sure, have at it. It's a good hobby, right? You could blow your money doing so many other things that are just really stupid and bad for you. Reloading, I don't think, falls into either of those categories. So if you have it, spend it, sure. But for new reloaders, there's another problem with this is the complexity that it adds to making the formula for ammunition. So a lot of the digital stuff that you see out there requires a little bit more attention to detail in the background. It requires a little bit more knowledge, like the base knowledge of good fundamentals of reloading. And now you've got to worry about a scale being calibrated correctly and all the technology involved in it. And sometimes for new reloaders, it can cause issues because you're trying to learn all of this new equipment that's high tech at the same time of trying to make ammunition, which is actually pretty low tech, right? It's a very simple process to make really good quality ammunition, and you're adding complexity to it and all of these new systems that you have to learn that really, in my opinion, is unnecessary and sometimes puts you at even a little bit of a risk because of the things you don't understand yet, trying to use these complex pieces of equipment to make really basic ammunition. So that's another danger you have to be careful of when it comes to your approach to reloading is not introducing so many things into the kitchen. Like you're going to make soup. So let's get a cutting board. Let's get the raw ingredients. Let's get a couple sharp knives and let's get started. We don't need, these 500 different types of blenders and blades and all this other stuff. We're just making soup. And in this case, we're just making ammunition. So be careful with that, right? And in some ways, I think it's a gimmick. Like a balance beam scale was used to measure gold. It's the most accurate way to measure anything. And so I don't want to tell you that these things are that much better. Sometimes they're a little bit faster, but they're also really quirky. Like I had a conversation with an application engineer from Akuma last night that is a shooter. And, buying all this really expensive equipment and all the problems he's having with it. This is a guy that's an application engineer for setting up machines that are extremely complicated in the CNC world. And he's still throwing his hands up in the air and saying, it's ridiculous. And I agree. So just as a new reloader, I'm just cautioning you, like if you're going to approach this and want to really master the art of reloading, let's start with some very basic equipment that's not so expensive, right? Paying a lot more for something doesn't always mean that you're getting a better product. So be really careful with selecting your equipment. Now, I am going to warn you on this one as a new reloader. Do not go out and buy a progressive press. Now, you can get deterrent press. I think there's one called a T7 at Reading makes that you can actually move the station on top to where the brass is pushed up into to seat the bullet or size. But any type of progressive press that has any type of automation to it or any type of multiple processes being done at the same time, especially for rifle reloading, and then maybe even in pistol reloading, start slow and master the process before you try to have multiple things going on the stove at one time. It's like trying to make 3 different dinners on the stove and in the oven while baking cookies, right? I mean, it's chaos. And it sometimes can lead to massive problems because you want to master each step of the reloading process on its own and understand it, right? Understand everything that's happening and keep an eye on it. If you pull that handle and every time you pull that handle, it's sizing, it's priming, it's throwing powder, and it's seating a bullet, how do you keep track of all that? And it leaves you open again to having some issues when it comes to making that ammunition. So my first thing that I always tell is try to avoid those presses. I know it sounds cool to crank out 500-600 rounds an hour and you're doing the math in your head like us guys always do, right? We're going to get down for 3 hours and make enough ammunition for the whole year. But as a new reloader, it can really cause you some situations where not only can you make lousy ammunition and 300 pieces of it in that hour, but you can actually make dangerous ammunition as well because there's a lot to keep track of when those progressive presses are running and you don't quite have the skill set yet, right? So my recommendation for new shooters is to buy a simple kit. Like I love the Reading kit. I think they call it the Big Boss. It comes with all this really cool stuff. And if you buy the big kit, I think it even comes with like a balance beam scale and deburring tools. And there's a BR2 powder thrower, which is a manual thrower. There's a powder trickler, which you're going to need if you're going to make really accurate rifle ammunition. And I have made literally hundreds of thousands of rounds on those types of presses. And I have had standard deviations that just still to this day, I can't match with any of the stuff that we use now, even though we spent 20 times the price on some of these electric powder throwers and everything else that's fancy out there. I still look back to the simple days, and we still have all that equipment here, by the way, and we still make ammunition on this stuff, and we teach it in the class. But I would have no problem going back to just using simple tools, and I have made match-winning ammunition. I have won matches doing it that way. I have always had really great consistency, and I've had some really great standard deviation. So starting off with one of those kits not only allows you to get everything that you're going to need, but actually at a discount. So if you bought all those pieces like from a Redding kit or a Hornady kit, and you bought them each individually, I think when you collectively add it up, you would probably spend 50% more. So, of course, they want to get you in their ecosystem. So they're going to offer this big kit at a discount in which you get to get all these really cool tools that you're eventually going to need, but you get it all at a nice discount too, which is really nice. Now, they don't sponsor the podcast. I'm not pushing any particular, brand or kit out there, but it's a really nice way to go. Now, another thing that I think is really nice, if you want an upgrade, right, is to buy a Forester press. I am a huge fan of Forester presses. I've used them forever. I have two. I have one that's so old, it's just unbelievable old, and it still makes great ammunition. I have it at my home bench. It's very easy. You don't have to have the different shell holders for all the different calibers. It's a universal base plate that allows you to use different size cartridges. So it eliminates some of the other little things you have to mess with. So it's one press that I would say, okay, I think that press is absolutely worth the upgrade and the money, and you can take your press out of your kit after you're done with it, start there. But sell it or put it on the bench beside you for whatever process you want to use. Now you have two nice presses. But start with a kit if you can. I think that's a great route to go. Get the books. So you'll hear me talk about this in the reloading classes, and we're going to do some live streams coming up in March when we start teaching the reloading class here. The actual reloading portion of the class is going to be taught live stream. So you're going to hear these releases on our online reloading class coming up over the next couple of weeks on safety, but you have to purchase the book, and you should follow the book in that kit line by line, and don't be afraid to go out and buy a couple other books. Now, I'm not talking about buying somebody's book that's marketing a book on reloading that's a shooter. I'm talking about purchasing the book by the manufacturer. Redding, Hornady, Lyman, any of those books that you can grab, and even some of the older ones at some of the flea markets and bookstores that you go to. If you can find those older reloading manuals, we'll talk about this in later podcast, they are worth their weight in gold. So it's awesome to read through them because they actually give you the recipe to make ammunition in every single one of those books. And if you follow that, I find here, truthfully, if you follow that book line by line and you do everything it says, and with every piece of equipment from your reloading dash to your press, and you follow their instructions line by line, you will make safe, reliable, and accurate ammunition. It's only when we modify it or we start doing what other people say to do that causes us problems. So if that's all you did, and that's what I did, I am telling you here that when I started reloading, I bought a Redding Big Boss kit, and I bought a couple reloading manuals, and I made my first ammunition with nothing more than that manual. Now, I made ammunition when I was a kid with my dad, right? But that was how he was taught by his dad, and no harm, no foul. That's how it works. But as far as wanting to make match ammunition and really making massive amounts of it for rifle shooting, that's how I started, and I have never, ever, ever had a problem with it. So purchase the book and follow it piece by piece through the process. Now, some hidden dangers, right? This is tips because we all have that personality. I have friends out there that are tighter than two coats of paint when it comes to shooting, and rightly so. I mean, everybody works really hard for the dollar, and they want to get the most for each and every single one of them. But that said, you can actually push that pendulum too far. So I'm going to give you a handful of things to watch out for that you might be tempted to do. The first one is don't buy range brass off the internet. For the record, it all says it's once fired. And I'm going to tell you it straight up. You have no clue what it was fired in. You have no clue how old it is. I mean, there's just so many unknown, it would be like buying a used set of tires off of eBay, sticking them on your car and doing a cross-country road trip with your family. I mean, I just wouldn't do that, and I would not buy used, ranged, picked brass because I've gone to the range many times where these guys are out there, and good for them. I mean, they're making a couple bucks and they're cleaning up the range, sure. But they're going around and picking up all this brass and they're sorting it out. And eventually when they get enough of it, they put it up on eBay or whatever and they sell it as once fired brass. It's all cleaned. It all looks nice when it gets to you. But man, you can have more issues than you can shake a stick at from brass that's been fired in ARs or AR platforms that are really oversized compared to what they should be in a bolt gun. They'll cause you issues to hardened things that's been shot too many times. You get a guy that's got shot out brass, and people at the range sometimes, I call them range slobs, but if it's shot out brass, they won't even bother picking it up. They'll just let it lay. And then here's this guy going along, picking it up and selling it to you, right? And it's about ready to split necks, split cases, loose primer pockets. I mean, there's just a million reasons not to do that. Or you don't even know the load that was shot out of that brass before you got it. So is it a hot load? Just avoid that at all costs. And I can share it with you because I shot a 264 Win Mag and they only made that brass every other year. And so sometimes it was hard to get, and I actually purchased some used, just like we're talking about here, and there's no way it was once fired. And, you know, it's all like, you'll see the disclaimers, well, this was fired by a police department, it's only been fired one time, and it's federal government 308. I shot 308 forever. And you just constantly seeing these posts of people selling once fired 308 brass from Federal Gold Medal Match, which there's a bucket load out there. It's all over the place, sure. But I just wouldn't do it. I think it's good practice. It's probably a good idea to start with brass that's brand new, that you know the history of, and that you don't have it intermixed with brass that had been range picked over the course of 6 months and then all sorted out, you know, Federal in this bucket, Winchester in that bucket, and then by caliber. And you could have brass in there that's been shot 3 times, 1 time, different rifles. So just don't do that if you can. The other thing I'm going to caution you on is buying any opened powder of any kind whatsoever. If you go to a gun show and the guy's got, let's just say Hodgkin's H4831 shortcut sitting there and it's an 8-pound keg, and he says, well, I used a pound of it, but I'll sell it to you at half price, I would never purchase that. And the reason being is you're really putting yourself at risk that that's what's in there, right? And you're putting yourself at risk, is it mixed? Where was it setting at? Where did he get it from? I mean, I've watched guys dump accidentally, honestly, over the years. Like, I've had this phone call. Hey, I accidentally emptied my powder thrower in the wrong 8-pound keg. What do? Do I just scoop what's on top off to the side and throw that away? And my answer is throw the whole thing away. That 8-pound keg might wind up at a gun show missing a pound. Now, it doesn't have much of Varget mixed in with it, but he may have accidentally, you know, dumped something in there and he doesn't want to shoot it. And it's not, in his mind, unsafe. So there you go. A nice discount and custom, you know, mixed powder that you're going to take home and try to make great ammunition with. So another rule of thumb that I have is do not buy any open powder whatsoever of any kind. You know, if your buddy goes, hey, I've got like 3 half-empty bottles of whatever powder, if you want to try to start with that, you know, say thank you, but say no thank you, and go out and purchase brand new powder from a reputable dealer, unopened, and start there. Now, let's talk about something that I would buy used, right? So let's just say reloading press would be one thing. You have a buddy that has a rock trucker that he bought new and he just never got into reloading. You do see that quite often. Now, I don't know if I'd buy one that was at a yard sale and is covered in rust, but you can find a decent amount of reloading presses out there, especially like the rock chuckers. I don't think you'll see very many Foresters and such. You might see some Reddings, like I sold a couple of those that I've had over the years. So I don't know if I would hesitate in buying that, especially if you know where it came from, because most people don't use them as much as you think. They're usually in pretty good shape as long as they're well taken care of. So if you saved a couple bucks on that, I don't think that will be too big of a deal, and I wouldn't stress over that too much. I don't know if I'd buy one at a gun show because he probably bought it used from an estate or something, but if you see one out there and it's a great deal and you can sort of get a good feel that the guy had it and it's in good shape, yeah, sure. That's one thing that I would buy used. Some other dangers that you're going to fall into when you start getting ready to reload, especially now we're talking about this personality, the saver, is, and this will come later on as you start shooting more, is using the brass too long or shooting it too many times. I have friends that have pushed like Lopua brass 10 and 12 and 15 reloads. And to them, every time they get another cycle out of the brass, they're saving money. And at some point, you're putting yourself at risk. The brass isn't that expensive. You've already got 10 reloads out of it or 7 reloads. call it good and get new brass. Like, be careful that you don't become your own worst enemy, because then you have problems at the range of splitting necks and having all kinds of issues with the brass. And costing you a match. So you don't want to destroy the one thing you love to do by pushing things too far. I am very quick to get rid of brass. So we have used different brass in the past, including Hornady brass. So we would wind up with a ton of 6.5 Creedmoor Hornady brass. And I would shoot it for sure. And we would shoot it here at the school all the time. But we would only reload it about 2 or 3 times. And then we would toss it. Hornady, I don't think it's like a long-term brass like Lapua or Alpha brass that I would reload it 10 or 12 times. But we could get 2 or 3, nice reloads out of it. And then I think about the 3rd or 4th reload, we would just toss it in the recycle bin and get some money back for it for the weight of the brass. So you got stuff like that you guys want to reload it 10 times because we're annealing it or other things. Just be really, really careful. Higher quality brass sometimes can last longer, but don't be that guy. Like, I'll give you just a quick example here. My dad came over one time and I just neck turned, I think, 300 pieces of 300 Win Mag brass. So I was shooting a 300 Win Mag. I was cleaning up all the brass. Back then, Lapua stopped making it. So you basically bought Winchester brass. You sorted it out the best you could. And then I always neck turned for uniformity, because back then the brass uniformity really mattered and the factory stuff just wasn't all that good, right? It wasn't at the level that I needed it to be. So when I was neck turning all of this brass, I noticed something funny at the base. Something just didn't quite look right. Like, I didn't take much off the brass at all. And Winchester brass and other things sometimes are thinner necked anyway. So they're not really meant to neck turn. And I wasn't turning the brass wholly around to clean it up. I was just taking off the high side. And, but I was like, you know what? That just doesn't something seem right. Like when I get down onto the shoulder of where the neck meets shoulder. So I split a piece of brass in half. And sure enough, right at the shoulder, the actual brass itself was only about 2 or 3 thousandths thick after I neck turned it onto the shoulder. It was too thin. And I hardly took anything off of it. I was absolutely stunned. So my guess is that when they formed the neck, that area got stretched thin to begin with. And then when I neck turned it, I made it even thinner. So I tossed it, all 300 pieces. My dad come over, which, by the way, if you're listening to this podcast, love you, right? But he came over and he shoots 300 Win Mag. He's seen 300 pieces of this new Winchester brass, freshly neck turned, in the garbage. And he was like, what the hell is that? And I was like, well, that's that 300 Win Mag brass. I said, it's too thin at the neck. And they're not all that way, but I found 1 or 2 of them that I just didn't like. So I'm just tossing them all. And right away he started getting in there. Now it wasn't in garbage, like food garbage, but it was in my, recycle bucket, and it only had that brass in it, right? Because you should get rid of it pretty quick. And he was looking through it and he was like, well, I can probably save some of these. I could probably pick them out. That's that personality, right? He was like, he wanted to see if he could weed through that bucket to get, because it was brand new brass and it was all neck turned, which takes forever if you've ever done it by hand. But he was like, well, maybe I can try to pick some good pieces out for myself. And so I put a lid on it and I told him if he stuck his fingers in there, I was going to smack him with a stick, right? And I got rid of that brass. But that's that personality. When you get into reloading, especially when you're trying to save a couple bucks here and there, something like that, it becomes temptation, right? And so don't let the best of you get the best of you, right? Don't go down that hole too far to where you, like my dad was doing that. He didn't mean any harm by it. He wasn't being stupid. But it's that gut instinct. Well, I could probably save a couple pieces of this. I mean, it's just what we all do. It's a natural thing. And I put the lid on it and told him he wasn't allowed to touch a single piece out of there. I was going to hit him with a stick on his knuckles, right? And so you just have to cry. Here's the deal. You got to suck it up, shed the tears, throw it away, cry a little bit, and move on. And just forget about it. Don't even let it sink into your head that, hey, I'm throwing away like $300 worth of stuff and stuff that I worked on for 2 weeks. I squared up the primer pockets. I did the flash holes. I cleaned open and got rid of the burr in the flash holes. And I trimmed them all and I neck turned them all. And so it was a lot of work to do that to that many pieces of brass and just to throw it away. It sucks. So that's the other personality you have to be careful of. If you have that, right? Resist. If you have that personality, you're going to weed in there and try to get a couple good pieces to save for testing or something. As soon as you throw it away, just take it out, throw it in the garbage. Just get rid of it. You don't get rid of it so you don't have the temptation. How's that? Then the last thing I want to touch base on the saver personality, right, is don't shoot other people's reloads. Be careful you getting components from your friends, buying open things that you're not sure what they are, put yourself at a little bit of a risk there. The other part of this is be careful on the oils and lubes and stuff that you're going to buy. You're going to read on the internet of all these people that make this homemade stuff all the time. Don't do it. Just go out, buy the Hornady One Shot. It's what we use here. And by the way, Hornady doesn't sponsor the podcast, but don't fall into this home remedy stuff. Just buy the lube that's proper. I think the One Shot's the best on the market, easiest to use. And I think for newer reloaders, you can get a little bit in the neck. We'll show you that in the online reloading class as well. But that's what I would use. But be careful. There's so many guys mixing stuff up. Well, you don't have to buy that stuff for $13 a bottle. You're just going to take in your kitchen and you're going to grab linolea oil and you're going to grab this and linseed oil and you're going to mix all this together with alcohol. And don't do that. And then you are going to have to learn how to clean your brass. And if this is just me throwing it out there, do not ever, ever, ever fall into that trap of wet tumbling with stainless steel media. Just go out and buy a nice little vibratory or rotary tumbler and put corncob media in there to clean it with a little bit of flitz, and you will be a happy camper and you will not damage your barrel. So I'm just putting it out there right on the podcast. Don't care if I offend anybody. Do not buy that wet tumbling stainless steel media and run your brass through there. You always have a chance of some of it getting stuck in the case that you can't find or stuck to the side. And if you shoot that down your barrel, you're going to damage your barrel. So save yourself the heartache. We have actually seen barrels come in here damaged from it twice now. So do not, right? Just a good old tumbler and then just a good old corncob media with some flitz. We use flitz for cleaning our brass. Very simple reloading dies. So for the new reloader, just a very standard full-length sizing die, no neck bushings, right? Just a standard Redding, Forester, or Hornady full-length sizing die. And then a nice competition seating die. If you can afford it, one with the micrometer on top is nice, but a nice competition seating die, sometimes you can buy them in sets, but full-length sizing die with no neck bushings. All right. Before I continue on, I do want to say thank you to our last sponsor. I want to thank TriggerTech for supporting the show and the podcast. TriggerTech is the maker of fine rifle triggers. I know I say this every podcast, but they are one of the best triggers on the market because in my mind, they're the easiest to install, the easiest to adjust, and probably the safest trigger made. So they have a new roller bearing system that they designed. It really allows the end user to adjust a pull weight easily and safely and not make an unsafe trigger. I always say that the trigger isn't there to make the gun shoot. The trigger's there to keep it from shooting until you're ready, right? It's to keep it from firing. They make them for lots of different makes and models, and they also make straight shoe, curved shoe. They make the diamond, the primer. I mean, there's so many triggers to choose from. So we recommend them here. We use them here. It is absolutely my favorite trigger on the marketplace. You can learn more about TriggerTech at triggertech.com. That's triggertech.com today. All right, so I don't want to get too long-winded into the new reloader. We are teaching the online reloading class. You'll see some videos pop up that are all safety related over on our Patreon page. So you're going to stop over to Wolf Precision and you'll see all of our online classes. And then in there, you're going to see our online reloading class. That is actually kicked off. Our first 2 videos are posted. We'll have 2 more videos coming up on safety. I really recommend you pay attention to those videos and watch them. And then we're going to start into our actual training videos. They're going to be live streamed. So when we actually teach the reloading portion of it, we're going to live stream it. So that way at the end, we can answer some questions and we can try to make some really great ammunition with you all. Don't forget the 2025 long-range shooting school here at Wolf Precision. We are so blessed and so excited. We do have a client coming in from as far away as Australia this year. So if you're listening, gentlemen from Australia, we are certainly looking forward to having you, looking forward to bringing you into the shooting school. And what's really cool is we've only got 2 or 3 slots left for the entire year. So if you would like to join us here at our in-person class, you can stop over to Wolf Precision. I believe we have 3 slots left for the year. We'd love to have you. If you can't make it to one of our in-person classes, we do have our online long-range shooting school, which is our 3-day class in an online form. There's about 18 to 19 hours of content. There'll be new updated content coming from that this summer. But everything that you're going to learn here at the school is there, and we even recommend those coming to the school the first time to maybe join up and take the class to get really familiar with all the things that we're going to teach here in person and just make it easier to absorb all of this stuff. So it's a great way to wet your whistle and sort of get a preemptive peek at everything that you're going to learn here. when we put a rifle in your hands. So looking forward to having everybody here at the in-person shooting school. Again, 3 slots left. And if anyone would like to join us, you can sign up at wolfprecision.net. And don't forget about our online long-range shooting school. The next podcast we're going to dive into is probably my favorite. We're going to be talking about the artist and just the love of reloading and doing it for the reloading's sake, and some of the things you have to watch out for. So I'm going to dive into the bushes for the common things that we talk about here. Some of the things that can catch off guard, or you get down the wrong rabbit hole too far, you can pull your head back out a little bit. So we're going to go over that one in the next podcast. And then if you enjoyed this podcast and like to share it, we certainly appreciate it. It means a lot to us here. It helps us a lot to find new audiences and get in contact with new listeners and just really sharing a lot of hopefully great information. And if you enjoyed the podcast, you'd like to leave a comment down below, that helps us a lot, or a review, give us a good rating. We really appreciate that. It helps us a lot in our standings and ratings as well. So looking forward to the next podcast with you all. We're going to keep going down this road of the 3 personalities of shooting, and the next one's going to be the artist. So thank you everybody for taking the time to join us. My name is Jamie Dodson. I'm your host, and you are listening to Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building Podcast.